It turns out that it was Labour that's the nasty party after all, not the Tories.
Well, if you're referring to Damian McBride's book, look, this is the past. We've changed. We're a different party now. We're a different leadership, and I think this is a postscript on what happened before. It's not really relevant.
How do we know you've changed when Mr. E. Miliband and Mr. E. Balls were at the heart of the Brown-Out project when all this was going on?
Well, whatever happened in the past, Andrew, but under Ed Miliband's leadership, we are a very different party. And frankly, my constituents here in Leeds, people looking forward to the Labour Party conference that's coming up, are not really interested in that. They want to know, given the cost of living crisis that they are having to deal with it day in and day out, whose side are the major political parties on? And I think the dividing line in British politics is now becoming very clear. We've got a Prime Minister who thinks that tax cuts for millionaires is the most important thing to do while imposing increased costs on people on low incomes. And Ed Miliband is about helping the squeezed middle, bringing back, for example, the 10p rate of tax, finding jobs for young people who are long-term unemployed. That is actually the big issue, the big debate in British politics, not what the Westminster bubble gets very excited about.
Well, you call it the Westminster bubble, but I think voters want to know about the morality of the people that they're electing. And this is about a Prime Minister who employed Mr. McBride, a Prime Minister who constantly lectured us on his moral compass. And yet we see that under his watch he unleashes the most terrible smears, not against the Tories, against his own side. We have a right to know and discuss and talk about that when politicians posture about their moral positions.
Well, I'm not interested in posturing, Andrew. And look, the past, what has happened, has been written about, I think, by just about everybody.
It's only a few years ago, Hilary Benn. It's not when Disraeli and Gladstone stopped the earth.
His two penn'orth to what has gone on. Some of what happened was pretty unedifying, but it is a postscript on the past, actually, Andrew. And we're looking forward to the conference next week. And honestly, the concerns of the British people are not what you're getting excited about. It is about what is happening in their lives now. The fact that for 38 of the 39 months that David Cameron has been the Prime Minister, wages haven't gone up as much as prices. People are finding it very, very tough out there. And what they're longing to hear is from political leaders who say this is how a future Labour government is going to help you, and that is what we're going to be focusing on in Brighton next week.
Yeah, and I'll come on to a bit of that in a minute, but you keep on saying the party's changed, but we have no evidence for that. It's still the same gang who are running it, who were at the heart of this operation when Mr. McBride was spreading his poison. Indeed, we now know that Mr. E. Miliband was Gordon Brown's anointed successor. He's the one he wanted. So, again, why do we know that things have changed? How do we know that this sort of stuff, this kind of amoral approach to your own side, isn't still going on?
Well, for the very simple reason, Andrew, that you read the same newspapers that I read, and you don't find any of that in the last 3 years since Ed Miliband became the leader of the Labour Party. The fact is, he is a new leader. This is a new party. We've learnt from those lessons of the past. Things are different. And the truth is, Andrew, you know that to be the case just as much as I do.
Have you ever been briefed against by Mr. McBride?
I have no idea what Mr. McBride did in relation to me, and to be perfectly honest, I am not interested in that. At the time, I was busy getting on with my job, which is what ministers do, and what I'm focused on now, what the whole of the Shadow Cabinet is focused on now, is what are we going to do to help the country to recover, to help the people who are being squeezed. And I understand entirely why you want to ask these questions, because some people get very, very excited about this, but it is the past, and it's not about the politics of today and the future.
Excited, I would suggest, is the wrong word. Depressed and dismayed that this could be happening at the heart of our politics among people who we are paying to run the country. Our tax dollars go to pay these people's salaries, and instead of trying to make this a better country, they use that money to rubbish their own side. I think that's the issue I think that people would quite like to raise. But let me come on, just finally on this before I come on to your conference next week. Are we seriously expected to believe that neither Mr. Brown, nor Mr. Miliband, nor Mr. Bowles knew that any of this was going on their behalf? Are we seriously to believe that?
Look, as I understand it, that's what Damian McBride says. But look,
Damian
McBride in the end lost his job, and rightly so, given what was revealed. But that was a long time ago.
Yeah, he only lost it because he was rumbled, Hilary Benn. You know that. He could have carried on. He wanted to do to the Tories what he'd been doing to his own side for years. But anyway, let me come on your conference. I mean, this couldn't happen at worst time for your conference. And indeed, the run-up to your conference is a bit of a shambles. I mean, your opinion poll ratings have collapsed. You're barely ahead of the Tories now, despite this huge squeeze on living standard. Only 2% of the country regard Mr. E. Miliband as a natural leader. And now we've got all this stuff dragged up from the past to remind us what you were like in power. It'd be hard to think of a grimmer backdrop for your conference.
Well, I tell you what is grim, life for a lot of people, because of 3 years of wasted opportunity, because of the way the Chancellor has handled the recovery from the economic crisis, the fact it's the slowest recovery we've seen for a very, very long time. That is what is grim. And people are going to be asking themselves the question, insofar as they follow the detailed ins and outs of party conferences, but they'll be saying to themselves, which party leader, which government that we elect in 2015 is going to be on our side? That is the fundamental choice in British politics. And the Prime Minister, the coalition, has showed itself to be on the side of the few. And honestly, Andrew, you couldn't ask for a better example of that than the decision to cut taxes for millionaires and those who are most well off. Now, that tells you everything that you need to know.
They're paying more tax than the 13 years when you were in power. 13 years in power, you taxed them at the top rate of 40%. They're now paying 45%, more than when you were in government.
Well, that's not actually correct, because you know we introduced the 50p tax rate
when we
were in government.
In the final 3 weeks of your government is ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous, Andrew.
In the final 3 weeks.
It's a fact. And the reason we did that was because, given the state of the economy, if you really do believe that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the biggest burden, which is what the Prime Minister claims, well, we believe that. That's why we introduced the 50p tax rate. And he comes in and he says, given all that's going on, the most important thing for me in my budget in April is that we're going to cut that top rate of tax. What are we talking about? Reintroducing a 10p tax rate, helping young people, the growing number of people who are long-term unemployed, get a job, helping with energy prices. These are practical policies that will make a difference to people's lives. And I think it's on those issues that people will make a judgment come the time of the next election.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it, that your position is you want to tax people who are working hard, who are adding to the wealth of the nation and jobs. You want to take 50% of their income away, but people like you who are wealthy, because you've got lots of wealthy assets, you don't pay the 50p tax rate, and you're not creating jobs, and you're not adding to the wealth of the nation. Is that really fair?
Well, I'm not entirely sure what your point is there, Andrew. The fact is, we felt when we were in government that a 50p tax rate was a fair thing to do, and we opposed the decision that the government took to cut that tax rate, which they did in April, at a time when lots and lots of other people working very hard, contributing to the economy, doing all sorts of jobs, are themselves being squeezed. And I think that is a sign of the government's values. And the fact that we say we would do things differently and have a 10p starting rate of tax again is a very, very clear difference between the two parties.
Okay, final question to you, Hilary Benn. The recovery is barely underway, and as you say, lots of people have yet to feel it. Yet already the Tories are neck and neck with you in the polls. What happens when, as the OECD is predicting, this economy is heading for 3% growth? What happens to your poll ratings then?
Well, in the end, Andrew, the people will decide, and the poll that matters, of course, is the next general election. It was always going to be.
I've never heard that phrase before.
It was always going to be a tough fight. We're in a battle. Of course we are. And the thing to do is what Ed Miliband is doing, which is to set out what it is that we believe in, what a Labour government would do. And we are the party that is really concerned about the squeeze on people's living standards. And the question is, how is the recovery going to be shared out? Are we really going to learn the lessons from what happened over the last 20, 30 years? And Ed Miliband has showed that he is the leader who understands that. And you'll see that very clearly in what he's got to say next week and in the debates that we shall have at conference, which I, as I'm sure you are, greatly looking forward to.
Oh, I think of nothing else. It's keeping me awake at night with excitement.
Well, get some rest.
I'll try to. Hilary Benn, thank you for joining us
Thank
from
you.
Leeds today.